I'm Matty Trent, so I'm the viticulturist here at Nikola Estate. I'm here this morning with Dorham Mann, who has had a long association with both this site and the Swan Valley, and especially what we're here to talk about today, Chenin Blanc, as International Drink Chenin Day is coming up.
Well, Matt, we're here to talk about Chenin, and as many people know, the history of the variety is very much involved with the cool climate of the Loire in France, where it was the principal white grape variety, and probably best known these days for the sparkling styles that's made there. But it's interesting with respect to Western Australia. If we go back to the early days, it's well understood that most of the cuttings of different grape varieties came to Western Australia at the beginning of the colony in about 1829-30. The cuttings were collected from South Africa at the Cape. South Africa had a long established wine industry dating back to 1659. People don't often realise how old the South African wine industry is. But the relevance to that is that for a lot of years, the main white table wine variety in South Africa was Chenin Blanc, which they knew as Steen, S-T-E-E-N, and probably often still labelled as such over there. So it's quite logical really to expect that Chenin came across, because it was well grown and grown quite a lot in South Africa, came across with those early cuttings. Now, to my knowledge, not a great deal was done with expanding the variety here in Western Australia, because right up until in the earlier years, right through the early 1900s and right up until about 1970, Australians consumed something like 85% fortified wines and only 15% table wine. And here at Horton, particularly when my father took over from my grandfather, some magnificent styles of fortified wines were produced, a full range of styles, but amongst them were magnificent examples of the dry Amontillado style sherry and also the sweeter Oloroso style sherries. These had wonderful show successes for him. In fact, the Horton Oloroso style in the Melbourne show won Championship of Australia 13 consecutive times. The significance, though, of what I'm saying is that both of those wines were made from Chenin Blanc. Quite interesting, our warmer climate and the consistency of the Mediterranean climatic pattern that we have certainly favoured the variety to be grown to get that extra richness in it to make those styles of wine. But with respect to table wine, the most significant thing was that in 1937, my father persuaded the Ferguson family who owned Horton to purchase a Seitz pad filter to enable him to do sterile filtration of table wine. Now, this is very important for white table wine for its stability, and virtually no one had been doing that in Australia at that time. Now, in 1937, the white table wine that he made from Chenin Blanc and was sterile filtered and entered in the Melbourne show, won first prize. In those days it was just first, second and third too, not 6 golds and 10 silvers and whatnot. And the chief judge there, surnamed by the name of Senior, made special comments about this white table wine. What a beautiful, full-flavoured, soft style it was, and it reminded him very much of the best French white Burgundies that he's seen. Hence my father's idea to call that wine Horton White Burgundy, and it was 100% Chenin Blanc. And of course, not huge volumes of that were made in subsequent years, up until around about 1950, when the Ferguson family sold Horton to the Emu Wine Company. And the white Burgundy style in the marketplace was expanded quite considerably. It became a very important wine with the whole economy of the Horton operation here. And for that reason, because as you well know in growing Chenin, if we do happen to fluke getting a dose of summer rain just before harvest, it can get in a bit of a mess. And because the variety was becoming so important economically, my father decided that, and he was well aware that the variety that we call Tokay, really Muscadel, similarly made a full-flavoured, soft style of wine. What he always chased in the Horton White Burgundy was a full-flavoured white wine with a soft finish. And Muscadel helped in that respect, but the significant thing about Muscadel was that if it did rain, it didn't get in a mess like Chenin might. So it was sort of an insurance policy, if you like, to blend some of that into the white Burgundy. From about 1950 onwards, up until Dad retired anyway, which was the 72 vintage, the Horton White Burgundy had somewhere around 40-45% Muscadel and 55% Chenin Blanc. Now, another significant thing with respect to Chenin was that almost right through his life, Dad understood the variety was Semillon. He always used to call it Semillon. And you'll see that on earlier white Burgundy labels, that on the back label, this full-flavoured soft white wine made from Semillon. Around about when I was an advisor in the Department of Agriculture, along with the great viticulturist Bill Jamieson, we brought across quite a few different varieties around about the mid-60s from over east by Merbein from memory. They probably originally were brought from California. And we planted them up at the Swan Viticultural Research Station in more or less a quarantine type situation. Included amongst those varieties was Chenin Blanc. I was personally very interested in vine ampelography as an advisor in that, and as these young vines started to grow, I was up there one day when they were shooting away, and I looked at the Chenin Blanc and immediately I realised that what we were calling Semillon was actually Chenin Blanc. And this was confirmed for me not too long after when we had a visiting quite eminent French viticulturist, Dr. Max Reeve, and I was taking him around and showed him this, and he said, "Oh, definitely, that's Chenin Blanc." So that was when we realised that what we'd been calling, my father in particular, because Chenin wasn't planted much outside of Horton in those earlier years, was not Semillon, it was Chenin Blanc. So from about that period on, of course, we started to call the variety Chenin. And it started to be expanded amongst other places. Swanville, the Noack family at Swanville expanded it quite a bit. Sandalford did, of course. And Mick Waldeck, John Kozovich, a good example. And quite a few others, because that was the era when table wines were just starting to grow in public appreciation. And it was in 1972, the end of 1972, when I left the Department of Agriculture and went to Sandalford. Immediately, of the white wine styles that I was involved in responsible for making there, we brought out Sandalford Chenin, and I think that was probably the first time in Australia that the variety was labelled as a varietal white wine, and it was a very successful wine in the marketplace. And of course, the expansion of that. Remember, just before I left the department, I was involved in the layout of the Horton's big Boondah property up at Gin, and there was a lot of Chenin planted up there with, of course, the objective of expanding the Horton White Burgundy style. Just quite an interesting background to it. But of course, with the expansion of table wines, we've seen a lot more Chenin-based wines grown in the Swan Valley, predominantly in this establishment, purely and simply because of the size of the operation and the amount of Chenin Blanc that's planted. But talking about the wine style, which is interesting really, Chenin has always been the most beautiful white wine to drink, with its flavour and softness as we grow it in the Swan Valley. As a young wine, it doesn't have the aromatics that maybe varieties like Verdelho has, but where it shines is on the palate. The beautiful flavour, the soft finish, but more importantly, as a developed wine, it really shines. And there are lots of examples of that. For a great many years, Horton used to hold back a portion of the standard white Burgundy, these days called White Classic, and let the bottle develop for 6, 7, 8 years and enter it in the show as a developed white table wine. Time after time took top gold medal because of the beautiful way that Chenin would get this, Chenin-based wines would get this beautiful bottle nose and beautiful palate.
And some pretty obvious versatility in that grape variety as well when we see sparklings coming out of it.
That's right, of course, because that was a sparkling was a traditional use for it, and it makes lovely sparkling wines.
And you're saying fortifieds as well.
Yeah,
so
Well, that was
the full breadth of.
Yeah, and my father used to make a beautiful Sauterne style from Chenin Blanc too. In our climate is so conducive to growing Chenin because, as we mentioned earlier, its susceptibility to rot, and also, as you as a viticulturist know, it's a bit more susceptible to powdery mildew than some other white varieties are. So you just got to make sure you're in the growing season you keep the sulphur sprays up to it. Yes.
Yeah.
But Chenin it's a backbone variety of this region. And it's something we can be, a wine style that we can be so proud of in our Swan Valley area, and above everything else, it's such a lovely wine to drink.
We've got, between the two sites now, just over 37 hectares.
That's a lot of
Chenin, a good size. But the timeline you're explaining kind of matches, to my mind, some of the ages of the vines we have on this site.
Right,
so
that's
the
right.
oldest block that still remains is 1930.
Right.
Out on the highway by the school.
That's right. That was one of the first ones that were here.
Obviously there was quite a lot of expansion through the 50s, judging almost by staggered ages of, I think, 53, 54, 55, 56 are some of the blocks that we...
That's right. A big patch of it was planted between my old family home and the main road. That was a big open paddock when I was young. Planted about 1950, mostly to Chenin.
Yeah, it still is. It still is mostly. There's a little bit of Semillon. And some Verdelho, and a pocket of Verdelho in there as well.
And there was a little patch of Riesling on it too that my father grafted onto Chenin Blanc because Riesling was pretty weak on its own roots, and he knew the Chenin would grow well in that area, and it was grafted there.
A little bit of experimentation.
Yeah, and just for your own interest, and along the main road, where the soil has a bit more clay, the Chenin, there's about 10 or so rows there were grafted onto Grenache, because Grenache can handle the heavy clay, and Chenin doesn't like it. So there you go. They were the sort of things that were done.
I'm sort of discovering things like that as we go along there, where things have been grafted and on different rootstocks and that sort of stuff. That's right. Which is quite interesting. But yeah, we're very lucky to be custodians of vines that are of that sort of age.
Yeah. Anyway, with the coming up with the International Drink Chenin Day, I'd certainly encourage anyone to enjoy a glass of Chenin.
So you're having a glass on Saturday to celebrate?
Yes, we'll do that, and of course we'll be having something to eat with it too, because I've always, right through my life, been encouraged by my father, whenever you have a glass of wine, have something to eat with it. I think it's a very good principle, and Chenin goes so well with so many things, and we're seeing quite a diverse range of styles of Chenin Blanc too these days out of our region. Some picked a little bit earlier and getting the sort of a more sort of a crisper, shabbly style finish, if you want to call it that. And they're lovely wines to as youngsters to see and enjoy with a bit of prawns or some oysters or something like that.
I'm definitely on the oyster bandwagon.
Yeah, right. That's a good way to have a go with that, but it goes with lots of things too. And then, of course, the older developed wines, their colour deepens. Of course, they get a most beautiful greeny gold hue and this beautiful bottle nose, beautiful bouquet, and the softness on the palate, the flavour of the variety, and that's lovely. You know, when you've got that roast chicken out, you know, and things like that. Or,
we may have to wait and see what the weather's like on Saturday before we decide exactly what to go with.
Well, they're saying it's going to be fine, don't they? That's good. Yeah.
Some sunshine, Chenin Blanc.
Yeah.
Is there anything better?
As my late father always used to say, a meal without wine is like a day without sunshine.
Well, thanks very much for coming out and spending some time with us today, Dorham. It's been
a pleasure.
It's been fantastic listening to you, listening to you talk.
Lovely to be in an area like a place like this where I grew up as a youngster, running around from my earliest years of my life at Horton here.
Yeah, we've got new people running around here now, including my kids. Okay, so this Saturday is International Drink Chenin Day. And certainly as Western Australia's largest Chenin grower here on site, we would like to encourage you to have a glass in hand and enjoy it with friends, family and sunshine.